Yep.
My name is Robert L. Schuyler, or Bob Schuyler. I'm from the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. I'm a member.
Oh, look at me. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, we have to start again.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. My name is Robert L. Schuyler, or Bob Schuyler. I'm from the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, and I'm a member of the anthropology department there in the Penn Museum, which is one of the large archaeology museums in North America. And back in the 1980s and 1990s, we came out here to Silver Reef, which we see in the background, and we carried out a historical archaeological project here. We did a big service collection. We excavated 3 archaeological sites, and we worked very closely with the county commissioners of Washington County, but also with the foundation that was restoring the Wells Fargo building behind us. And what I'm going to talk about today is the service collection we did, and then I'll show you the sites that we excavated, and then we will go down to Chinatown, which is down in that direction. I should start out by saying Silver Reef is a very unique mining town because they found silver in sandstone. You can see the white reef back there. That's where the silver came out of, as well as some of the other hills around here. And that was unique in American history. Silver is not supposed to appear in sandstone. And it was good because it meant a lot of people talked about Silver Reef, whereas they might have ignored it because it was only like a moderate-sized mining town. In the 1880 census, 1870, it's not here. In the 1880 census, it has 1,051 people in it. In the 1890 census, it's got a couple hundred people, but it's basically dead. So it lasted for maybe 15 years or so, and then it collapsed. It was a very industrial, specialized community. It was intruded into this environment, so it wasn't naturally articulated with it. It was a single resource production center. They were after silver ore. That's all they were doing. And it was a very cosmopolitan human community with people from Ireland, from England, from Germany, from all over Europe, the East Coast. There were Mexican Americans here. There were Southern Paiute around that did some labor for the town. And there was an overseas Chinese population here in a small Chinatown. So it was much more cosmopolitan and complex than, say, the local Mormon towns that surrounded it, in which it had a symbiotic relationship with. So if we can go over to the Wells Fargo building, we can start the tour there and explain about the building, and then we will move up and down this street over behind us here. This is Main Street, and the Blacktop Road today follows the original historic Main Street. So that's very good because it didn't damage the archaeological remains very much. So if we can go over to the building.
So what made you choose the Silver Reef as your project?
We originally came out here. First, I should say that I'm from the East. I was raised and bred in Connecticut, so I'm a Connecticut Yankee. However, I went to the University of Arizona in Tucson for my bachelor's degree in archaeology, anthropology. And I was originally going to be a Southwestern prehistoric archaeologist, because at that time, 1960s, historical archaeology was just fully emerging as a field. And historical archaeology, by the way, is the study of the modern world, study of the last 500 or 600 years of global development when the world system emerged for the first time because of the expansion of Europe. So in this case, we're studying the 19th century, the Victorian period. So my bachelor's degree is from Arizona. I've always had a keen interest in the West. So coming up to 1980, I decided I wanted to work on the East Coast, but I wanted a project out here in the West. And I picked Washington County because Washington County has one of the best and most complex archaeological records from the historic period in this region. And that's because of the early arrival of the Mormons in the 1850s, 1860s, and it has all sorts of little towns, many of which are abandoned, that were former Mormon towns. And when we first came out here, that's what we were looking at. We were looking at the Mormon settlements, not Silver Reef. And we were here for 2 weeks in 1980. We did a survey about 20 different towns, some still occupied like Leeds or Santa Clara, others not occupied. Then people brought us here and showed us Silver Reef. We realized Silver Reef was a really excellent archaeological site, totally abandoned. When we arrived, all that was here was the building behind us. The Wells Fargo building still standing. The Rice building behind us, we'll see later, had had a fire and had burned the roof off. So it was just one standing building and it was abandoned. So we decided to switch the project onto Silver Reef. We did do a study of the local Mormon cemeteries, and a lot of times we photographed those. But from 1981 on, we focused on Silver Reef. We came back in 1981. We did this huge surface collection along both sides of Main Street and in Chinatown. And that's what we, in 2013, May and June, had just brought back here. And it's about 107 boxes of artifacts, because people then were not only burying their trash, they were throwing it, broadcasting it on the surface. So there was just enormous amounts of crushed tin cans cans, broken bottles, and things all over the surface that we collected. We came back in 1982 and excavated one individual site, which we'll see later, the Elkhorn Saloon. Then we came back in 1983, we did the Case Drugstore. 1983 we did the Case Drugstore, the Wagner Case Drugstore next to the saloon. Then we did archival research in St. George in the county records for 84, 85, 86. Came back in 87 and dug the backyard of Margaret Grant's Cosmopolitan Restaurant, which we'll also see a little bit later on. And then we're not only digging in the ground historical archaeology, we're doing minute excavation into the archives. So we took the Silver Reef Miner, that's the local newspaper, and we've taken it apart item by item, every issue. We've taken the Salt Lake Tribune, which is a big newspaper in Salt Lake. We've taken that apart item by item. In other words, any item that talks about Silver Reef. We did the Salt Lake Herald, we did the Pioche, Nevada newspapers, we did other newspapers, and then we went to archives around the United States, and we spent several years collecting and organizing basic information. So the project is equally archaeology, but there's also the documentary historical part. We did a little oral history. There was some oral history done here in the 1930s and 1940s. That's recorded, so that's there. I found only one living person who'd been born and raised in Silver Reef in the 19th century. There are people here later in the 20th century, but that's a different story. They're not really part of the Silver Reef mining community. There was a woman, Madge Koch, who lived up in Salt Lake. She was in a nursing home. She was 103 in the 1980s. And she was the daughter of a Cornish miner. She was born here in Silver Reef and lived here, and she remembered, for instance, the owner of the Elkhorn Saloon and could talk about him, although she was very clear that children never went into saloons. But he was very nice and would give Christmas presents out to children around the holidays, come out on the street and hand them out. So she remembered him directly. She's, of course, unfortunately gone now. So can we move over? Should we move over to the Wells Fargo building?
Sure.
Okay. You know when it was built? I can't remember. No, no.
1877 is, I think it's on the thing here, but 1875 people got here.
People first started at 75, but they didn't build that.